That one's a little bit above our punching weight.
What's that?
I said that one's a little bit above our punching weight there on that one. So
Yeah. And can you imagine just the eyes that are going to be on that thing for the next 5 to 10 years?
yeah, it's definitely going to be a high visibility project to say the least.
Yes. Cemeteries don't have the same concerns because if something falls into the ground, it usually belongs there. So, Dan, has your dad retired yet or no?
No, he's still going strong. He turned 63 earlier this month, and yeah, he's still at it. So keeps talking about retirement.
Nice.
So he's definitely thinking about
Yeah. I always run into him. It
it.
seems like it's Salty's.
So okay, well, it's 7 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our session today. So thank you everybody for joining us who has. So this is the first local leader session of 2024 for the Construction Leadership Council. I will be the moderator today. I'm Dan Mingo. I am the vice chair of the committee. And our guest today is none other than Johnathan Woolworth of Seabee Construction. And so I just wanted a quick reminder, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there is both a Q&A and a chat function within Zoom. If you have any questions for Johnathan, please use the Q&A portion. That way the questions will get sent to both Johnathan and myself, and we can get to those towards the end of the presentation. So with that out of the way, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Johnathan.
Hey, thanks everybody for getting up early. I'm not necessarily an early riser, but I'm on a project right now, so I'm up early. My name is Johnathan Woolworth. I'm the founder, CEO, project engineer, and intern at Seabee Construction. We are a service disabled veteran owned small business, focusing primarily in the federal marketplace. Um, a little bit about me. I grew up primarily in Idaho and then went to the Navy right after high school, got out of the Navy, went to college, and got a degree in risk management and business. I spent 12 years in the insurance industry in Portland, focusing in on construction. And about 9.5 years ago, I decided to leave insurance and move into starting a construction business because, well, I built a shed that 3 years later, after I sold the house, it blew over in a windstorm. So I thought I can be a contractor. Look at me. So that's kind of my story on how I got into construction a little bit. As far as AGC, I was the associate chair, or associate member chair for a number of years, as well as I brought back the CLC when it was on a hiatus for about 2 years. I was voluntold to bring it back, and so now it is what it is today. And everybody who's ran it since then has done way better than anybody could have ever expected. So kudos to Dan and the team and Amber for keeping it going strong. So my story is kind of different. I didn't go the traditional route of getting a degree in construction engineering management or working for a general contractor or a specialty contractor. I pretty much closed my insurance life in July of 2014 and spent the next 6 months of my life going through the process of getting my contractor's license in Oregon, filling out all the federal paperwork and going through that process, and then ultimately starting my company in January of 2015. And it was say the least, eye-opening experience. A lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of time away from family and friends. I think my first year in business, I put 42,000 miles on my truck, and I think I did like a dozen flights. I spent probably 80 nights away from home in that first year. And I scraped out a small fortune of net profit of $24,000. So not quite the money I was used to making, but it was something. But we focused in on working for the VA, where the VA sets aside about $4 billion for service disabled veteran owned contractors. It's a status that you have to apply for and get vetted and all the other fun stuff to qualify for. But once you're in there, the VA sets aside anything under $100 million to a service disabled veteran. Now that doesn't mean that you don't still need bonding. You still need bonding to do the jobs, but the pool you're playing from is a much smaller pool of competitors. Most people get confused with thinking, well, I'm not a veteran, so I can't work on a service disabled project. Only the prime needs to be a service disabled contractor. So that's kind of where we get a lot of our work with bigger contractors is as a subcontractor. My first job that I really got, and this shows you a lot about, when you start something, what you don't know is what you don't know, was a supply and deliver to Crater Lake National Park to supply new doors and windows to their staff buildings for their lodging, because they have people that live up there full time. They sent me a bunch of plans. I sent them off to Gel Wind. We got a bid, and when they got delivered, we delivered them up there. And when they went to install them, about a third of the windows were correct. The other 2/3 were the wrong size, and they'd taken out all of their windows before they installed the new ones. So Joe had to hurry and get new ones. I thought I was rich. It was about a $5,000 contract, and I was going to make about $1,000. And after expenses, time driving, going back and forth, I think I made a whopping negative $500 on the net of the project. But that showed me a lot about verifying your vendors, verifying people, and really my whole company has been about a learning process. And that's probably what I enjoy the most, is the learning process. I don't enjoy not making money sometimes, but I enjoy the learning process because it's paid off on the larger projects that we do, so that those errors don't continue to happen. One thing that the job after that we got was at the Seattle VA, and it was pulling direct TV cable to every hospital bed inside that hospital. It was a job that kind of, I say, saved Seabee Construction from my wife. She told me I needed to bring home a real paycheck, and that job finally did bring home a real paycheck, and it went really great. And ever since then, we've had project after project. The second year in business, we cranked out a good amount of work, but I learned then that not every government contract is a firm fixed contract. And I had encountered my first quantities-based contract. Unfortunately, I learned a lesson that how would I say this? Make sure your subcontract mirrors that of your prime contract with whoever the owner is. Because I wrote a lump sum contract for all my contractors when I was on a quantities base. And so at the end of 2016, when we finished the project outside of Eugene on a roof project, the government went back and did a bunch of measurements, and they ended up clawing back about $80,000 from me, and I still had to pay $80,000 to all those subs because it was a lump sum to them. So the stress was real. The anxiety, the sleepless nights, all the fun stuff that everybody doesn't think they have, or thinks ownership doesn't always have, they have. I was fortunate enough to make great friends from AGC, being on the associates council, that when I became a contractor, became good friends on the contracting side, and TGC, or T Girding Construction at the time, now TGC Structural. They did some work with me, and I was able to get mentored from Tom and Nate Girding, and that was very insightful. And Tom and Nate were very gracious in opening up and being real straightforward with me when I asked them, what happens, I go, I hate being a small guy, because when we make all these errors, and you guys never make errors. And Tom and Nate were very gracious and being very open, and telling me, every company, big and small, everybody makes errors. And so don't feel like you're kind of the dummy of the world that you made this error. The difference between your errors and our errors are magnitude and the ability to correct them, or weather those storms. And so I kind of asked more, and they said, you're, $100,000, loss. Sometimes, we know our contracts, but sometimes one project gets moved up and another one gets bumped back, and they collide, and now you don't have necessarily all the workforce that you need to, so you have to go out and hire them. So then if you were supposed to make an X dollar, and now hiring all these people erases that, they have the same problem. And so it was really, I don't want to say nice to understand that, but nice to feel like the big guys were so much more advanced, or so much perfect. And that kind of really opened my eyes to being, do the best that you can do. And it's not a mistake if you do it just once. If it's a mistake if you keep doing it, because you're not learning. And just having colleagues in the industry that you can count on and ask questions for, or even for, subcontractor base, or if they say, hey, this isn't a job for us, just, call this person, those types of relationships have really paid off well for me. That's one of the things that I really appreciate within the industry is, if you ask for help, they're there to help you, and vice versa. I've had many big GCs reach out to me and say, hey, can you help me on this project or that project? And I've always tried to be there for them like they are for me. And having partners is just really important, because it's a lonely day at the top of the mountain, because there's you can't talk to your employees about certain things. You can't talk to your spouse, your friends about certain things, unless they're in the same kind of position. So it's kind of really lonely. And so when you're having a hard day or a hard time on a project, it's hard because you have to keep all your employees motivated and happy, and the bills need to get paid. And then you're there kind of secretly behind the scenes, like the Wizard of Oz. Instead of, barking orders, you're crying into the curtain. So, but yeah, it's lonely at the top. I have a fun saying when they say, how are things? I go, there are great days and there are bad months. And that's kind of the way I operate is, as a kid, we lived for Christmas. But you couldn't tell me what happened on, December 20th every year. So a lot of the days just kind of run together. When you have a great day, it's a great day and the high is high. Whenever you have a bad day, it feels like that bad day runs into like a month. But except the bad days are what make the good days that much better. And an excavation company once told me, he goes, John, if you want to be a millionaire, I'll tell you the secret. And I was like, I'm open, like feed it to me. He goes, start with 2 million and lose the first one, and then you're a millionaire. And I was like, okay, all right, see how that is. The things I didn't know, that most of us don't know unless kind of you get into a leadership position is the unexpected things that nobody within the company really realizes is going on, from um, being audited by the federal government, which happens a lot for me. They just show up to my office and they want to go through my files, go through my banking, and make sure that, we're not a member of, a huge corporation that's backing us or something like that, because our designation requires that I'm 100% in control of the finances, 100% control of the direction, just a lot of red tape. The other thing is, um, sometimes you're dealing with other small contractors, which is great. But, you know, we work on a payment, we work on a contract with the government that's paid when paid. And they only pay when the work's been completed. So sometimes small contractors and even large contractors, they want to get a deposit for a certain amount of work. And when you're small, even 9 years later, and somebody asks you, well, we can't start work till we get $50,000 or $60,000. That's a hard pill to swallow. So then you have to judge, is this a good risk or not? Because I've done it before where I shelled out money for startup costs, and that contractor just took my money and ran. And legal, you think, oh, you'll go to court and you'll get legal and they'll give you the money, and that's not the case at all. I still have an outstanding judgment on the person, and have yet to see a dollar, even though it cost me about $4,000 or $5,000 just to get to that point. So, and I don't think I'll ever see that money. So it's just gone. Um, and then, as an owner and as a leader of the company, um, I really pride myself on making sure all my employees not just have what they need, but since we work so remote and we work all over the country, um, when they ask for something, I make sure I can get it to them within reason. Nobody's asking for, a Learjet. But if somebody says, I need a new iPad, or I need, even a suitcase or something like that, I make sure I provide that for them, because it's one less thing, that it's something very easy for us to provide, that gives them the reassurance that we are involved in their well-being. I also go by the motto of, we're a family, and I know everybody says that, but I'm sitting in Boise, Idaho right now, on a roof project. We're re-roofing the hospital here at the Boise VA, and we're redoing 4 parking lots. The reason why I'm here is a couple of my employees are taking paid personal time for some stuff, and the rest of them are on other projects. And so oftentimes I'm filling in for them to go supervise a job somewhere. So if my employees need to go see their kids in a play or a concert or run a track meet, all I ask is let me know when that is, and we'll work around it, and we'll get you. We want you to be there, because the construction projects will always be here, but you're never going to get a time to go back and see, your kid's 4th grade concert or your kid's 9th grade track meet or something like that. Those days are gone. So to me, it's all about being present in the moment. And that's probably a lot to do with, I lost my mom the year I graduated college, like 2 months later, out of the blue, and being present is really important to me. I don't track. This sounds terrible. I don't track vacation or sick time. If you're sick, you're sick. If you want to take a couple of days off, like a Thursday, Friday, and a Monday, to have a 5 or 6 day weekend, hey, as long as your work's done and there's no fires that are going to get brought to my doorstep, have fun. Go take off and do what you want to do. We're unique in. I feel like we're unique in. I did remote work before it was cool, before COVID made it cool. So we've never had a real central office. All my employees work from home. I've got myself and two employees in Portland, one in Salem area, one in Texas, 4 in San Diego, and soon one in St. Louis. And so we just operate without an office space. So we've always been remote, and it's interesting. It can be isolating at times, but we all try to get on the phone. And every year, a couple times a year, I try and rally everybody to go to something, either um, a baseball game or a football game or a basketball game, or even grabbing dinner at some place, a nice location. And I fly everybody to wherever we are, so we're all together. Um, but primarily about 6 years ago, we were fortunate enough to start working with the National Cemetery Administration, with the VA. So if any of you are familiar with Willamette National Cemetery, we build a lot of those large cemeteries throughout the US. Right now, I think we have 4 projects going with them, with 2 more under contract. And it's a small niche. There's only about 5 of 6 of us in the country that really do it. And it's a interesting mix. Dealing with the public, as everybody knows, is always trying. Dealing with the public who are mourning the loss of a loved one and working around that is even more difficult, just because oftentimes our excavators are running, dump trucks are running, and if there's a service nearby where we're working, we have to stand down, and the government doesn't give us lost time for those, because those last about an hour to 45 minutes. In some cemeteries we have 15 to 20 services a day. Not saying that all of them impact us, but they do. In the big city cemeteries, we have, and I call big cities, we're working on one in San Diego. We did one in Sacramento. We're going to do one in Denver. We run into awkwardly the same problems as we do when we work in small cities, like in Twin Falls, Idaho, or Cedar City, Utah, Bakersfield, California. The federal government is the federal government, and they want what they want, and they will crush anybody to get it. And so sometimes subs don't understand a lot of the nuances of the requirements. And so they may give you a price, and they say they understand everything. And then once they get on the project, it's like we spoke different languages. And so it's a balance between holding your price and holding your standards that you have to hold to the VA, with working with a contractor who sometimes could be a little either upside down in their bid, or be stubborn in understanding what their requirements are to be. If anybody knows a great landscaper, please call me. That's our biggest bane. It doesn't matter what city, state. It's impossible to find a good landscaper and irrigation guy. And those contractors, while their scope is small, maybe only 5 or 10% of the project, it's what everybody sees. And so it might as well be 100% of the project, because if it's bad, they assume everything else is bad. And those can be hard. And no general contractor ever wants to break a sub. I mean, that's at least not in my book. It's always, how can we work together? And if somebody doesn't want to work together, then you have to refer back to the contract that each other signed. And that's kind of hard, is really maintaining good relationships with those people. Because I'm only fortunate enough to do my job because of the great subs that we find and that work with us on a continuing basis, that provide great service. If you're in it for the money, yes, you can make good money. But you can also lose a lot of money. And it's I think the second most riskiest business venture to go into, behind a bar or a restaurant. And there's a lot of sleepless and anxiety nights. I think anybody who participates in a bid, or putting together bids, there's the old saying that the happiest and saddest day is on bid day. When you win the bid, you're super excited. Right after that comes anxiety of, oh my gosh, what did we miss? That happens a lot, especially on cemeteries, because somebody may not, they'll just look at the plans and not read the specs. And in a lot of the world of construction, the plans dominate the specs. Whereas in the federal world, the specs dominate the plans. So if the specs say one way, and the plans show it a different way, you go with the specs. If it's not in the specs, but it shows it in the plans, you go to the plans. If it's not in either one, then you go to RFI. So it's definitely a different way of thinking, and it can be very frustrating for people who don't regularly work in the federal space. Um, on the, I'm talking down the federal space, but I love it. Um, one of the big reasons why I do enjoy it is we get to know the same contracting officers and their on-site people. But one of the great things that makes it good for us as a small business to work with the feds is we fall under Congress's Prompt Payment Act. And so once we have an approved invoice, which only takes if you're running good daily reports and all of that, takes them about a day to approve your invoice. Once you submit it through their system, you get paid roughly between 5 and 15 calendar days, direct deposit into your account. So you're not floating money for 60 or 90 days. Um, and they don't generally hold retention. And unless it's a um, mission critical project, they're using estimated calendar days to complete a project. And so liquidated damages oftentimes are not, if you're going over your time, but you're keeping up with progress and work is flowing. In general, they don't do any kind of liquidated damages. It's only when you stop work or you refuse to work will they assess liquidated damages. Or if they can't use the facility when they need to, then they would assess it. But oftentimes the VA is using a third-party designer and a third-party estimation service that says, hey, how long will it take to build? And I don't know how many on here on this call are architects and engineers. So if I offend anybody here, this will be it. But most architects and engineers have never built anything, so they don't know how long something takes, nor do they know the process and procedures to actually get it done. Just because you can draw it like this doesn't mean it can actually happen. And that's something that contracting officers are understanding, because from the time it goes from design to actually construction is about 4 years within the government. So imagine you putting together a bid for a project 5 years ago, and then it comes out, your prices are going to be out of whack. Um, all that stuff is gone. And so they haven't, the architects and engineers generally don't see their plans again until we start construction. So if they miss something, they miss it then, and then we get to go through the RFI process and find more money and all the fun stuff. But generally, it's pretty solid of an industry. Um, like any industry, there are people you love to work with and the people that you are happy the job is over with. Um, but overall, it's been a good industry for me. It's with travel, my wife and kids. I've got a 10 year, almost a 10-year-old next week, and I'll have a 10-year-old next week, and a 6-year-old. They kind of get it. But it doesn't make it easier for them or my wife when she has to hold down the house with those two. So I try and be home as often as I can, but they also understand the industry and what I've chosen to do has provided a pretty good life for us. Not without stress, but pretty good overall. And that's probably the most important thing, is having the support of your family and your friends when you start a business. It's amazing to see how many people you don't know support you more than the people that you are super great friends with. And that's probably the hardest part, is you lose some friendships when you start a business because you're crazy or you don't know, or, um, you know, but somebody on the internet will be like, hey, great job. I'm so happy, so proud of you. Like it's the craziest thing. So, that's probably the hardest part, is losing some of those friendships because they think you're too busy. And to some extent you might be too busy, but it's really your time is very limited when you start a business. I do my books, I do a lot of the bidding, um, I do site walks, I do all the meetings. So like I wear 5 or 6 hats, and it's exhausting some days, and some days I just want to not be not be Seabee Construction. I just want to be Johnathan Woolworth. And when you start a business, you're always your company, and there it's really hard to break off from having a day off, because if you have a day off, you're worried what's going to go wrong because you took that day off. Um, but I got a couple questions that people sent in earlier. I'm looking at my phone because I'm not technology savvy. As you get older, your technology awareness will go drastically down, and you will be afraid to plug in your iPhone to lose information. So one of the questions I got earlier was how did I find the right mentors when I started the company, and have you had a change in mentors for different parts of your career? I think mentors for me have always been who I gravitate towards. Um, similar people, similar interests, people open and willing to take on new friendships. Um, I think I gravitated towards Tom Gurding really well, because early on in my AGC career, when I was an associate, um, there was a big to do about um, having every state and local job um, have a certain percentage of union contractors on it, apprentices and all of that. And I think that's really important. But Tom stood up and said, what about the guy, in the southeastern corner of Oregon, who can do the job and he's local, but because he's not signatory to a union, or he doesn't have enough employees, it's him and 4 other employees, they don't meet the qualifications, so they can't do the job. And so I really admired the fact that Tom, who's signatory to a union, stood up for the guys who weren't signatory to the union. And that meant a lot to me as somebody I could look to, who remembers when Tom had the bags on his waist, and he was framing things. That meant a lot to me, because he still remembered where he came from, and how hard it was to get to where he is now. That he still is sticking up for not just the union guys, but just the guys who don't get a voice sometimes. And that's, I think, to me, and a mentor, that's somebody you have to align with, because um we're all in this together. I was a hospital corpsman in the Navy before I went to college. And if somebody was injured, nobody cared about where the blood came from if you needed a transfusion, as long as you got it. And so I think within our industry, mentors, you find them and you hold on to them and you value them, because those are the ones that are really going to make you successful. They're going to give you insight that you didn't know about. They're going to give you um, they're going to give you the pep talk when nobody else gives you that pep talk. They're going to be there at 4 in the morning on a phone call when you're freaking out about something. That's where a good mentor for me has come from, are those people that are there, not because they need to be, but because that's who they are. And they're not about the money. They're not about how can you help me today. It's, hey, I've done this for a long time. How can I pass on some of that knowledge? Let's see. I'll go one more. See, we have a question coming in, so maybe we'll go to that one next. What do I do to build your employees and prepare them for larger roles or promotions within your company? Um, that's I'm an interesting hire. Considering I didn't come from a traditional construction company. Um, I find talent wherever I can find talent. I've found talent from an Uber driver who became a great superintendent for me before he retired about 2 years ago. And then I've found talent where other people just see them as maybe a laborer. What I do to prepare them is I kind of prep them and say, my first question, are you okay with traveling? And if they say yes, I said, okay, what's your goal? And a lot of them say, well, wife, kids, and I said, no, like, what do you want your career to be? Because I'm here to talk about your career. And they enjoy doing X, Y, and Z. And so then I send them to as many classes and as many trainings and as many certifications as I can, starting with like an OSHA 30. And then I have AGC has been great. They have a CQM, a Certified Quality Management Program, the Army Corps of Engineers. And on every job, we have to have somebody who has a quality control management certificate to ensure that the quality of the work is by the specs, and they sign off on that. So for me, if you stop learning and you don't want to take on a little bit more role, I don't ask you to drink from a fire hose, but eat an elephant by 1,000 bites rather than all at once. That's that's how I promote, is how I'll take the reins from me, and go run the ship. And you can do that. Ultimately I want you to be successful, and making the errors that I made, I'll try and help you not make them. But if you make them, I don't really get too upset with them, because I was there too. And so sometimes people get frustrated when they estimate a job and they expect us to make a certain amount of money. And then when it comes out that we didn't, or we broke even or made a couple of dollars, I ask them, okay, what could we have done differently? And they instantly tell me, and they put it in their bag of knowledge, and the next time they don't make that mistake. So um that's kind of how I promote from within. It's all of what you want to do. I took a gentleman who was a general manager of a restaurant, and he had, I think he managed 4 pretty high-end restaurants in the Portland metro area, never had construction experience before. And now he's running a $24 million cemetery project for us. And what he's doing is talking to the VA, talking to architects and engineers, and not coming from a construction background. It's taken him some time to get the lingo down and understand how to talk. But he is probably one of the smartest people in our industry, in my industry, and the VA respects him so much that, when he asks a question, they generally, like, they don't think he's some new guy off the street. They understand it, and subs really appreciate him, because he's a lot like me and wanting to work with people, and how can we get this job accomplished, and thinking outside the box. So that to me is really insightful. So he has a degree in English. So but he knows cost control from an aspect of running 3 restaurants and doing all the ordering and negotiating prices and things like that. So just because they don't have a construction degree doesn't mean they can't be an amazing person in the construction industry. Do you mind if I answer Paul's question?
No, go right ahead.
All right. Paul asked, if you could go back to when you started your company, what would you do differently? Not start it. No, just kidding. What I would do differently. Let me see. I don't know if I would do anything generally differently. I think I probably would have asked, or probably made sure I had a good contract attorney on, not on staff, but on at least retainer, that could help me through reading through the contracts and setting up my subcontracts at the very beginning, because otherwise, I wouldn't have had some of the issues that I did have, um, when I started. So I think, for me, that's where I would probably start, is saying, hey, I had a great accountant. TKW has been my accountant since day one. They've been really great. And Darian Loisel and Kevin Ike are both my attorneys. And, going forward, they sometimes laugh and they go, oh, you're looking at another contract. But they've saved me more money than they've costed me. And so I think having a good relationship with a good contract attorney that can maybe work with you on price of just reviewing a contract when you're first starting, would be something that I would do differently for starting, because I don't think I hired Kevin or Darian until like year 3, and it could have saved me a lot of money in year 2. So yeah. Nathan Griggs asked, myself, having worked on a VA cemetery as a prime contractor before, I found the VA hard to maintain positive relationships with. What has been the key to creating and maintaining that relationship you have with the VA and other clients? Um, yeah, I think I think understanding working with the VA as much as I do, um, I think I have a my my I don't know motto when I get a contract is I don't care about what we won the job for. I want to just complete the job. And so I don't necessarily always look at the dollar amount. And I think that's probably some people would say, oh, that's a terrible way to look at a business. But if I'm always worried about the dollar amount on a contract or on a project, um, the VA, at least in my experience, is quick to pick that up and they quickly push back on things. And so for me, my contracting officers that I've dealt with, um, it's, you know, like anybody, setting up the job right, getting on the job site and just go, 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 and start working as fast as possible. But also holding them accountable for, submittal deadlines or punch lists. That being said, there's an individual within the VA. He's probably a great person outside of work. He is the bane of my existence for the last 2 years. And but it's you're always going to come across people like that. The key is I've always found that having a great relationship with the person who signs the check goes a long way. And so I have a lot of conversations with contracting officers. Sometimes I go, and when I say I go above and beyond, it's not saying like not everybody does that, but sometimes I will do things that would normally be a change order and I'll just do them because going through the paperwork of doing the change order or things like that is not worth the fight for the money. And sometimes it's just easier to take it on. And then when the VA recognizes that or the COR or the third party inspectors see that, they mention it. I've gotten that reputation of like, oh, you're working with Seabee Construction, you're going to get a better project than you would have thought you would have gotten. And um, so I don't say my reputation precedes me, but I've had contracting officers um, reach out to me saying, hey, we have a project coming on and we'd really like you to look at it. Or, I've come in second or third place on a project and other contractors they don't feel comfortable with, they've awarded the contract to me because they don't feel they'll get the same product of what they're trying to build. And so I think a lot of it is trying not to um, be straightforward with the government, explain to them where they're struggling. And you have to be able to understand from their point of view, um, they have a budget they're trying to stick in and they have, 3 piles of money. They have the contract pile, they have the change order pile, and then they have the inflation escalation pile. And sometimes, well, most of the time recently, um, all 3 of those piles end up going right into the base contract because the estimate was made 5 years ago. So I think working with the VA and working with any government offices is it's all about being transparent, working with them. And, when you're doing a little bit of extra work, that maybe would have been a change order, it's good to mention it when you're having those weekly calls so they understand like, hey, we're doing this, these embeds needed to be here and they weren't there. So we got them and we just put them in, and they go, oh, why don't you submit it for a change order? It's like, it's not worth the money and we'll just catch up on if there's another change order down the road. But I always put contingency money in my bids. So that way we have money for, $1,000 little deal or 2,000 or 3,000 little deal. I really don't try and push for change orders until we get to, $5,000-6,000 plus, just because of those reasons. And, it's served me well within the VA system. All right, let's see. I got no more. Let's see here. Another question was asked. Um, was the plan when I started the company to specialize in federal government projects? I'd lie if I told you yes, I was totally going to specialize in federal government contracts. Um, I saw the barrier to entry within the VA or within the government to be low and less risky. So that's kind of why I went the federal route. In addition to that, not having any experience with any other industry or niche. I don't have any good relationships with architects and engineers that design projects for owners, and then they're going out on the private market to do those. I would love to, but one of the caveats of federal government construction, and most people hate it when I say this, is for the most part we don't have any inspections from like city and state. We're exempt from permits, and Oregon, OSHA, and a lot of the OSHAs, they can come and advise on the job site, but they can't fine and they can't shut down a job site. And then the third one or the fourth one, I guess, is you don't have to be licensed in every state that you're working in, because a federal job site is basically a reserve. It's like an island. So it's exempt from all city and state requirements. The only thing you do have to pay are obviously the sales tax and file taxes in those states. But that's kind of why I got into federal, is it allowed me to spread my wings and really go that route is kind of why I went to it, and I just kind of stuck with it, and it's been great. During the pandemic, when everybody was shut down, they were still pushing out jobs for cemeteries, and we kept winning and we kept doing them, and it was probably our best years were during COVID, unfortunately. But yeah. All right, one other question I got is, when you hire and interview potential candidates, is there something that you found to be effective in determining a candidate was going to be a good fit for your company or culture? Considering I don't really advertise when I hire somebody, um, Nate or Tom Girding, again, I'll go back to Tom. It's like Tom's free advertisement over here. Tom told me you can hire a person one of two ways. You can hire the wrong person when you absolutely need them, or you can hire the right person before you need them. Either way, it's going to cost you money. And so most of the time, I've always been pretty fortunate of finding people before I need them. Or I knew I was going to need them soon, but they were the right person. And so I hired them on early. But I guess the people that I look for have to be somewhat crazy like me, in that you have to want a sense of adventure. You have to be a people person. Um, you have to be not afraid to pick up a shovel and do the work alongside the trades. On the right now we're re-roofing a building here in Boise. Well, 7 roofs, and for some reason that back in the 80s they thought it was a great idea to put a TPO roof with 40 tons of 1 to 3 inch river rock on top of it. Now that's great, except for there's a 5-foot parapet wall all the way around the roof, and it's a hospital. So how do you get all of this rock off the roof? So you have laborers up there removing this rock with shovels, tarps, and a forklift. And the least I can do is go up there and grab a shovel and help, fill wheelbarrows or sweep up to make sure the piles are staying organized and safe. And so for me, that's what I really look for in somebody, is not necessarily somebody who's just gonna sit in a Connex or a job trailer all day and write a report. But somebody who's willing to get out there and help out, if it's digging a trench, or if it's putting together a water line, or anything like that. It's all about the team. And so if you think you're too good to do something, you're probably not a good fit for my company. Because I'll get just as dirty. I will, spend the nights out on a roof. I'll drive hours to do to a job site. And that's my job as the owner, but I want someone to mimic that because I feel with what I pay people, um, a lot of people are shocked at kind of what I provide. And you know, it's one of those things where um that's how I value my people is I want to make sure that they're comfortable. They can afford to buy a house in the city of Portland. They can, have kids and not have to worry about health insurance. They have really healthy 401k match. They've got a work vehicle that they can use for personal use. Um, they have their own credit cards that, I'm not a super stickler on. And so if you need it, charge it, go get it. Just if I ask questions about it, um, make sure you can, back up why you needed it. But that's kind of how I hire. It's very untraditional. Um, if I find you genuine and I like you, probably have a pretty good shot of getting a job with me. If you're trying to tell me what I need to hear, probably not going to be the one. I can admit I am not the contractor expert, but I know my field pretty well. Um, I can't tell you the difference between 3,500 PSI concrete and 4,500 PSI concrete, other than it's stronger and it costs more money. But other than that, couldn't tell you the difference. So, um, yeah, I think that's how I hire is I find people who have a little bit of sense of adventure, want to do a good job, and they value people's relationships and just want kind of a different feel from a employer. No more questions. I can't believe I answered everybody's question. Nobody else has a question.
Well, not so fast. I got one for you myself, Jonathan.
All right.
So I liked your saying earlier about there's great days and bad months. And we talked about some of the things that cause those bad months, some of the setbacks and failures that come with
Yeah.
starting up your company. But let's talk about some of the positives. What would you say, maybe one of your top three best days and what caused it and what was that experience?
Oh, top three best days. Um, so I think the first national cemetery I won was Snake River Canyon National Cemetery. It had been kind of this weird goal of mine to build a national cemetery. I just thought, I'm friends with with the Girdings, obviously, and Brian Shoemaker and Steve Mulaney from PNC and Todd Hess before he retired. He was a great mentor as well. And I always, joked with some of those guys saying, hey, you guys build these great buildings and these great structures, but one day someone's going to tear them down. No one ever tears down a cemetery. So for me, it was kind of like one of these things of like, we all can drive by a job site and be like, oh, dad helped build that or mom helped build that. I can be like, dad built that, and like it's a cemetery. Yep, he still built that. And so winning that first job, that first national cemetery in what year was that? I think that was 2019, 2020, somewhere. I think it's 2019 because we started before COVID. That was probably the proudest, like happiest day. Um, I think the obviously having kids is a completely different happiness in that. And I think the next happiest day because of my construction career was I was able to build my wife and I's kind of dream forever house, where our kids can grow up, run around and play and have their friends over and all that. So that's probably the second best time that I can think of is that. And then probably third, just seeing my employees, I guess one of the biggest compliments I've gotten from them is, man, please don't ever lay me off because I'll never find a boss as awesome, as great as you. And that's probably like the biggest compliment I can get is, my employees will go to bat for me, and I will go to bat for them. And that's something that I think is so valuable to me as not just an owner and a boss, but just as a person that, I treat people how I wish somebody would have treated me when I started my career or was in my career, and really valued those things. All right. I hope it's EJ. Um, EJ, what has been one of your worst days and why did you learn from it? Oh, worst days is probably that roofing project outside of Eugene that we did. We thought there was asbestos in the roof and there wasn't. And then so the government clawed back about $70,000. And I made the early mistake of I wanted to win a big contract, early because I wanted to grow and all these things. And so I kind of underbid the contract thinking I was going to be smarter than everybody else, and found out I was just dumber than everybody else. And when we found out there wasn't asbestos in the roof, and they clawed back that money, I was hoping I was gonna be able to use that money that we didn't need to use for asbestos removal to be able to kind of pump up some of the number that I didn't, that for some other options that we were a little lean in. It didn't happen. I just sold, my wife and I just sold our house. Our son was just over a year old. Um, I I went to full panic mode that, we were gonna go bankrupt and all the other things that you do as a small business when something like that goes catastrophically wrong. Um, and so I guess what I learned from it was bid the project the way the project is written, and bid the project to make the money that you need to make to be successful. Everybody wants the big project. Everybody wants that flagship project, right? But sometimes those flagship projects aren't worth the money because there's so many eyes on them, or it's so technical, or it's just hard, and you're frustrated. I gotta go by the motto now of, I'll make $1 million over 100 jobs rather than trying to make $1 million off of one job. And so that slow, steady growth is something I learned is you can want the job, but the price is going to be what the price is, and don't sacrifice your standards of what you need as a company to survive, as also as a owner to make your company continue to grow. So while that was probably one of my worst days, it was probably one of my favorite jobs because I learned so incredibly much on that one job. Just all the details is where I really could have done not so well. So great question though. Thank you. And I think we're like 7:57. I thank you guys so much for attending. I feel humble and honored that the CLC and AGC would have me speak to any of you. If any of you ever need to get a hold of me or want to reach out, I'm sure everybody on the CLC probably has my contact info. Please feel free to share an email or phone number. I'm always open, always willing to help. So I feel really humbled that you guys would ask me to do this, and really want to say thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today. It was great to hear your story, and I appreciate you making time to share that with us. So just before we go, I'd just like to let everybody know our next event that we've got with the CLC committee will be our first Engaged Leadership Series of 2024, and that's our in-person events. And so the first one is scheduled for May 20th at Brick's Tavern in Tualatin. And we'll be discussing mentorship in construction.
Great.
So thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thanks everybody. Have a great week. Be safe. Have fun.
All right, see you everybody.